I made the mistake of telling my family too soon. The night before, I had still been stupid enough to think they would be happy for me. I called my mother first, because that is what you do when something impossible happens and you still want to believe love will speak before greed does. I told her I had $3.8 million. Not in some fantasy way. Real money. Life-changing money. The kind that makes your hands shake a little when you say the number out loud. She cried. She said God was good. She said my late father must be watching over me. She said we would all sleep easier now. By morning, I understood what she meant by we. At 7:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email from her. Subject line, family distribution plan. I sat up in bed and opened it, expecting maybe a prayer, maybe a message telling me to breathe and think carefully. Instead, it was a spreadsheet, color-coded, itemized, organized by name. My mother had divided my winnings before I had even had coffee. There was a column for her retirement security, one for my younger brother's business recovery, one for my sister's home down payment, one for tuition help for two nieces. There were church donations, a used SUV for my aunt, dental work for a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, and at the bottom, a section labeled your remaining amount, as if she were generously leaving me a slice of my own life. 92% of it was gone on paper. I stared at the screen, so long my vision blurred. Not because of the money, because somewhere between my call the night before and sunrise, my mother had stopped being happy for me and started assigning me. And the worst part was the note she attached at the top. This is the fairest way to keep the family together. That was when I realized this wasn't advice. It was a demand dressed up as love. If you had asked me a week earlier whether my family would ever try to claim my money, I probably would have laughed and said not seriously. That sounds naive now, and maybe it was, but families train you into certain beliefs so slowly you don't realize how much of your judgment belongs to them. In my family, I was the dependable one, not the favorite, not the most protected, not the one everyone worried about. I was the one who could handle things, the one who found a way. If a bill came due and my brother was short, I covered it. If my sister's daycare fell through, I picked up the gap. If my mother hinted that groceries were tight, I transferred what I could before she had to ask directly. I never thought of it as being used. I thought of it as being a good son, a good brother, a good man. That was the language my mother had always wrapped around obligation. Family first. We take care of our own. God blesses the ones who don't count pennies with blood. She had a way of making generosity sound like virtue and boundaries sound like moral failure. If I hesitated, even for practical reasons, she never called me selfish outright. She didn't need to. She would just go quiet in that disappointed way mothers can, then mention how hard things have been for everyone else lately. My younger brother, Nate, had been living inside that system his whole life. Nate was charming, irresponsible, and permanently one crisis away from needing rescue. A flat tire became a transfer. Late rent became a loan. A business opportunity became a family emergency. My sister, Marla, was less dramatic but no less entitled. She always had a reason her needs came wrapped in urgency. School fees, medical deductibles, a housing issue, something with the kids. None of it was imaginary, but none of it was ever fully her problem either. Somehow, family money always meant accessible money. And my mother sat at the center of all of it like an emotional bookkeeper. She remembered every sacrifice she had made for us and used those memories like currency. To be fair, she had sacrificed a lot. She worked hard, stretched every dollar, and carried our family longer than anyone should have had to. That was part of what made this so complicated. Her guilt worked because it was built on real history. But over time, history had curdled into entitlement. Looking back, the signs were always there. She once volunteered me to help Nate with a car note without asking. She told Marla I could probably handle her daughter's summer camp cost before I had even heard about it. Well, I got a raise a few years ago, she said, half joking and half not. Well, now we know who the family blessing is. So when the money came, I didn't tell them because I was foolish enough to think they were perfect. I told them because I'd spent my whole life being trained to believe that good news belonged to the family the moment it touched me. I should have turned my phone off after reading the spreadsheet, but shock makes you slow in stupid ways. The first call came from Nate at 7:42. He didn't even say good morning. "Man, Mom told me you were finally in a position to help me get back on my feet," he said, sounding almost relieved, like I had just been approved for a duty he had already accepted. Then he launched straight into numbers. A used truck, equipment payments, some landscaping contract he said he could definitely land if he just had reliable transport and startup cash. He said it fast, confidently, the way people talk when they believe the money is already emotionally theirs. I asked him what Mom had told him. He laughed once, that you were doing the right thing. By 8:30, Marla texted me a screenshot of a 2-story house listing with a fenced yard and a caption that said, "Mom says you can help me finally get the kids into something stable." By 9, my aunt called to tell me how grateful she was I had remembered family. I hadn't remembered anything. I had been asleep while my mother apparently held a dawn meeting in everyone's imagination. My cousin Jeremy, a man I had not spoken to since a funeral 4 years earlier, sent me a message saying he was humbled by my willingness to help with his dental situation. Humbled, as if I had personally reached out offering to restore his molars. Then my mother called, not to ask how I felt, not to check whether I had eaten, whether I had slept, whether the sheer shock of winning that kind of money had settled into fear yet. She called to explain the spreadsheet like a manager reviewing a reasonable budget. "You have to understand," she said, "people have needs." People. Not one person said, "This is your money." Not one said, "Take your time." Not one asked what I wanted to do with it. My mother talked about fairness like she was dividing an estate, not looting a future. She said Nate needed one real chance. She said Marla had children and should not have to struggle when I had been blessed. She brought up her retirement, the roof repair she had postponed, my late father's medical debt, my aunt's transportation, church ties, emergency reserves, and a little cushion for extended relatives so no one would feel forgotten. No one would feel forgotten, except apparently me. By lunchtime, I was getting family group messages with phrases like "we're proud of you" wedged between passive-aggressive questions about timing. One cousin said we should gather that weekend so I could share my vision with everyone. My sister asked whether I planned to wire the down payment directly or through Mom for simplicity. Nate sent me pictures of trucks. Not trucks. He was comparing options. That was when it finally hit me. They had not simply talked about my winnings. They had emotionally spent them. In less than 12 hours, I had gone from son and brother to funding source. My good fortune had been stripped for parts before I had even spoken to a lawyer, before I had paid taxes, before I had exhaled long enough to think. And every message carried the same poisonous assumption underneath it. That generosity was no longer my choice. It was my assignment. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone buzzing every few minutes and felt something I had never felt around my family before. Not anger exactly. Claustrophobia. The part that changed everything was not the spreadsheet itself. It was what came after. Around 2 that afternoon, my bank's private client desk left me a voicemail asking me to return a call regarding a recent inquiry connected to family planning assistance. I didn't even understand the sentence the first time I heard it. I replayed it twice, then called back. The woman on the line sounded careful, professional, almost apologetic. She explained that someone identifying herself as my mother had called that morning asking what would be required to establish a temporary joint access structure for family distributions related to my winnings. She had not been given any information, of course, but she had spoken as if my authorization was already a formality and that the only question was timing. I just sat there holding the phone. My mother had not only divided the money in her head, she had started trying to position herself between me and it. When I hung up, I went back through my messages with a different kind of attention. Not hurt. Analysis. And that was when I found the family group thread Marla had accidentally replied to with me, still included above the fold. It was older than the payment plan by several hours, started just after I made the call the night before. My mother had sent the first message. "Don't overwhelm him tonight. Let me handle this properly in the morning." Nate had replied, "He better not start acting brand new." Marla wrote, "If he keeps most of it after all we've been through, that tells us everything." Then my mother again. "He knows what he owes this family. I'll make sure he does the decent thing." The decent thing. I read that line, 5 times. No one in that thread asked what I wanted. No one said I deserved time. They had gone straight from celebration to management, from joy to containment. Worse, they had already begun preparing the moral case against me before I had even said no. In their minds, any boundary I set would automatically become proof of selfishness. That was the real discovery. This wasn't about emergency help or genuine need. It was about control, possession. My money had become a family asset the second it touched my name, and my mother had appointed herself chief distributor before the first sunrise. That realization did something clean inside me. It hurt, yes, but the confusion disappeared. I no longer had to guess whether this was love tangled up with desperation. It wasn't. It was entitlement wearing my mother's voice. I did not say no right away. That's the part that still embarrasses me a little, though maybe it shouldn't. People raised inside guilt do not step out of it cleanly. We hesitate. We explain too much. We search for a softer version of refusal that won't trigger the full family machine. So when my mother called again that evening, crying this time, I listened. She said she had sacrificed her whole life for us. She said all she wanted was security in her old age. She said I was blessed for a reason, and that money means nothing if you don't use it to lift your people. Then she said the line I knew was coming, the line she always used when she wanted gratitude to behave like debt. I raised you, she said. Don't forget where you came from. As if I could. Nate took a rougher approach. He said if I let him keep struggling while I sat on millions, it would say everything about my character. Marla leaned holy and wounded, asking how I could watch families suffer and still call myself grateful. My aunt told me blessings are tested by how willing we are to share them. A cousin I barely knew sent a 3-paragraph message about legacy, unity, and what my late father would have wanted, which was interesting considering he had ignored my father while he was alive. By the next day, the language had shifted. I was not thinking carefully. I was being greedy. The same people who had never once asked how I felt about winning life-changing money were suddenly experts on what decency required from me. No one asked whether I wanted to pay off my own house, secure my future, travel, disappear for a month, invest wisely, or simply breathe without being treated like a walking account balance. No one asked if I was overwhelmed. No one asked if I was scared of ruining my life by handling it badly. They only wanted access. And still, part of me wrestled with it. Because they weren't wrong about one thing. I had been the helper. The fixer. The one who quietly stepped in. Saying no didn't just feel like a financial decision. It felt like stepping out of character in a family that had written mine years ago. Then I looked again at my mother's spreadsheet. Not one category on it asked what I needed. That was the moment the guilt stopped feeling holy and started looking ugly. They were not asking me to be generous. They were trying to train me back into obedience. The first smart thing I did was stop talking to my family before I had a plan. The second was call a lawyer before I called anyone back. Her name was Denise Holloway, and within 10 minutes of hearing the broad outline, she said the one sentence that made my shoulders unclench for the first time in 2 days. You do not need to negotiate ownership of your own money with people who never had a claim to it. I met her and a financial planner the next morning. By noon, the money was already moving into structures my family could not touch, shame, vote on, or emotionally invoice. Taxes were accounted for. A trust was drafted. A long-term investment plan was set in motion. Portions were placed into limited access vehicles with strict release rules. I even established a small charitable fund in my father's name, not because anyone asked, but because for once I wanted one decision around that money to come from peace instead of pressure. Then came a family group chat. My mother had started one the night before, titled Blessing Distribution Discussion. By the time I opened it, there were already 43 messages. Nate asking for a timeline. Marla saying she needed clarity for the kids. My aunt reminding everyone that gratitude should guide the process. My mother posting a prayer emoji like she had not spent the past 36 hours trying to corner my bank.
So I did not answer emotionally. I forwarded the group chat to Denise. 10 minutes later, a PDF appeared in the thread from her office email. The silence that followed was almost physical. The letter was formal, calm, and devastating. It stated that I had retained counsel and professional financial management regarding all matters connected to my winnings. It made clear that no verbal promises had been made. No family member held legal or moral authority over any portion of the funds, and no further requests, assumptions, spreadsheets, or discussions about mandatory distribution would be entertained. Any future attempts to pressure, impersonate, or interfere with financial institutions on my behalf were to cease immediately. Then came the line I know hit hardest. No direct distributions to extended family are planned at this time. Any future gifts, if made, will be voluntary, private, and solely at my client's discretion. Nate was the first to respond. You got a lawyer involved? Seriously? Marla sent, wow. So this is who you are now. My mother wrote nothing for 6 full minutes, which for her was the digital equivalent of an earthquake. Then finally, after everything this family has done for you, this is cruel. I stared at that line and felt absolutely nothing except clarity. Cruel would have been letting them keep believing love gave them access. Cruel would have been financing a system that called me blessed only when I was useful. Instead, I typed one sentence beneath my lawyer's letter. The money changed nothing. It just showed me what all of you were already willing to do for it. Then I muted the chat. For the first time since winning, the money felt like mine again. Not because I had more of it, because I had finally put something stronger than family guilt between it and them. After the letter went out, the family split in the way families like mine always do when access disappears. Some went quiet immediately. Those were the ones who had only shown up because they smelled opportunity and lost interest the second the door closed. Others got louder. Nate sent a voice note calling me fake, arrogant, and corrupted by money he had never touched. Marla tried a softer route, saying she was disappointed but still loved me, which somehow made the emotional invoice feel even more expensive. My mother waited 2 days, then left a voicemail crying so hard she could barely get through the words, "I never thought you'd turn your back on us." That was the strangest part of all. In their version, my boundary was the betrayal, not the spreadsheet, not the pressure, not the private family meeting they held around my money before I had even slept on winning it. Me saying no was somehow the wound. I didn't cut everyone off forever, but I changed the rules completely. I gave nothing under pressure. I answered no financial questions on demand. I helped no one who came to me through guilt, performance, or family rank. Later, quietly, I did help one person, an old teacher who had once covered my lunch account when I was a kid and never told anyone. I sent that support anonymously, and it felt cleaner than every family obligation I had ever carried. That's what I understand now. Generosity only means something when it is free. The moment it is extracted, assigned, or emotionally collected, it stops being love and starts being control. People say money ruins families. I don't think that's true. Money just removes the curtain. And what came out from behind mine had been waiting there much longer than $3.8 million.